The Timberwolves defense just keeps getting better with Rudy Gobert on the floor. We'll talk about the even starker differences of the Rudy on and off defensive lineups next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Happy hump day in this weird week between Christmas and New Year's, and happy New Year's Eve. Hopefully you have exciting New Year's Eve plans. Of course, your New Year's Eve day afternoon plans should be watching Wolves Hawks, a weird 2 p.m. New Year's Eve matinee, not a New Year's Day matinee. I feel like the Wolves have played New Year's Eve night the last couple of years, but today in the afternoon. So I actually don't mind that. I think it's a good thing. So we're going to talk about that game a little bit later, but we're going to hit first. I want to get through kind of digging in on the Rudy Gobert, the differences between the Rudy on and off lineups related to the Timberwolves defense. The Wolves have consistently had a good defense this year, but it's phenomenal with Rudy Gobert on the floor, and it's horrific with him off the floor. We've talked a bit about it in the past. We've talked about the Randle Reid pairing and why that hasn't worked, but there's a couple other numbers I want to throw out as we dig into this. And honestly, the defense has been really good over the last couple of weeks. I guess the latter stages of the Nets game and Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets notwithstanding on Christmas Day. But I want to dig in on some of the defensive stuff. We'll talk about some of the league-wide power rankings that have come out this week, the Wolves compared to the rest of the West and the rest of the NBA. And then we'll close with the Wolves-Hawks matchup. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. Okay. So let's start with the defense. So the Timberwolves this season with Rudy Gobert on the floor are phenomenal. And so what I want to do is look at like just how good that number is. And then we can look at the best lineups and the worst lineups without Rudy Gobert on the floor, because I think both are relevant to the conversation. So if you just go on Cleaning the Glass and you plug in all lineups with Rudy Gobert, so all 5-man lineups that include Rudy Gobert, which effectively gets you, it's not exactly the same as the on-off number, but I guess we could do this either way, but I'll do it that way. So that gives you, let's see, defensive, it's the 93rd percentile defensive unit, 107.7 points per 100 defensive possessions. That would rank second in the NBA. So it's 93rd percentile among 5-man units, but as a team, it's a little bit of semantics, but there's a difference there, right? So like the Thunder's best unit is likely better than the Wolves' best unit defensively, but it's possible that the Wolves' second best unit, which also includes Gobert, is better than the Thunder's second best unit. I don't know that it is, but that's the difference. But if you take all the 5-man lineups that include Rudy Gobert, they would give up 107.7 points per 100 possessions, which would be second if that was the Wolves' team to the Thunder, who have just a generational defense over the last couple of years. The Thunder are giving up 105.4 points per 100 possessions as a team straight up this year. Detroit is second at 110.6. Again, Minnesota is 107.7. So that would slot in very nicely in between those two numbers. Now, if we want to compare that to where the Timberwolves were 2 years ago, when they easily had the league's best defense, that year they gave up 108.9 points per 100 possessions. So the lineups with Rudy this year are more than a point per 100 possessions better than the Timberwolves lineups 2 seasons ago when they led the league in defensive efficiency, according to Cleaning the Glass. Well, according to Anywhere, they led the league in efficiency. But the gap between them and the second best team was larger than we'd seen at any point, only one other time in the 20 years prior. And when I say generationally good for the Thunder, I mean that. So like last year, they were the best in the league, 107.4 points per 100 possessions, and they're under 106 this year. And again, 107.4 per 100 possessions last year. That's only slightly better than the Rudy lineups this year defensively for Minnesota. These are, this is no Nickeil Alexander-Walker Rudy lineups, right? He's not on the team anymore. So the Timberwolves with Rudy Gobert have been another thing I want to throw out there. You might have seen this on X. This was like last week or something. But our guy Jack Borman had reposted from our friends at B-Ball Index, actually, which I've cited quite a bit in the past. B-Ball Index posted, okay, this was a week and a half ago. So I don't think it's changed. In fact, I think it's only gotten better. They posted the Timberwolves have been the most dominant team at the rim this season. They're defending the rim better, or they show then a scatter plot essentially, which shows rim points saved per 75 possessions on the y-axis and rim shooting talent on the x-axis. And Minnesota's in the upper right quadrant. Nobody else is in the vicinity. The Spurs are the next best team, and of course they played a lot without Wemby, and with Wemby, that they're probably in the exact same place as the Wolves. But the Wolves are in a different stratosphere than anyone else, which means that they're defending the rim better, and that again, that is higher than everybody else, including the Spurs. And then they're also shooting better at the rim themselves. So it's a two-way proposition here. It's not just Rudy. It's the offense and the defense. And I think that point is relevant here because it shows that they're defending the rim better than anyone else. And then it also shows that they're scoring at the rim better than everyone except Miami. Miami's the only team that has a better rim shooting talent mark on B-Ball Index, which essentially is rim efficiency. How often are you getting to the rim and scoring at the rim? That's notable. That's a really, really notable statistic, and it's super important. I've talked about this previously about how that's buoyed the Wolves' offense is how well they shot at the rim. But again, the rim points saved are directly attributed to Rudy Gobert, just how good he's been. We'll talk about power rankings here in a little bit, but John Schumann at NBA.com, who does the best power rankings out there because he provides a ton of context and just pours a ton of work into this on a weekly basis during the season. He talks a little bit about Gobert in his post this week, or his power rankings article. And he talks about Gobert's on-off a little bit and how it's the biggest on-off differential on defense among full-time starters who played at least 500 minutes in the last five seasons. He says opponents have shot 52.9% in the paint with him on the floor and 59.6% with him off. So that's nearly a 7 percentage point difference, which first of all is a massive gap. And second of all, under 53% in the paint, that's unbelievable. And again, another feather in the cap of Rudy Gobert to show just how good he's been and how good the Wolves defense has been with him on the floor this season. Now, if you take Rudy Gobert off the floor, that obviously is a whole other story, or it's, I guess, the exact opposite of this story. It's exactly what you might expect. And it's how Minnesota ends up with what's been a top 10 defense all year, but currently is quote unquote only sixth, air quotes, only sixth in the league. They have a 7th percentile defense with Rudy Gobert off the floor, 123.7 points per 100 possessions, which, yes, would be the worst in the league. That's 5-man units that do not include Rudy Gobert. Those lineups have been worse than the Pelicans. They've been worse than the Jazz. They've been worse than the Wizards. They've been worse than name your favorite terrible team in the league. They've been worse than everybody without Rudy Gobert on the floor. Now, it's been a little bit better lately, but the lineups with Gobert have been better too. So that gap hasn't really, like the overall numbers have improved a little, but the gap hasn't really changed that much just because in general, the Timberwolves have tried harder, played harder, I guess, defensively this year. That's a huge piece of it. So I don't know what the silver bullet here is. I guess the other point I wanted to make and what I'd like to see a little bit more of is Jaden McDaniels should, or I should say, well, yeah, I can say it this way. With Rudy Gobert off the floor, Jaden McDaniels should always be on the floor. In fact, the most used lineup that does not include Rudy Gobert also doesn't have Jaden McDaniels, which is a big issue and surprising that happened. Now, it does have Jaylen Clark, and I know I've said in the past that the Wolves need to always have Rudy, Jaylen Clark, or Jaden on the floor. But what I've actually said, what I most recently said on X was 2 of those 3 need to be on the floor at all times. You should never have a lineup that does not include 2 of McDaniels, Gobert, and Clark. And I don't care about the offensive implications. I just don't. They've got enough high-end offensive talent and enough Anthony Edwards that you could withstand that. The most used non-Rudy lineup does not include Jaden McDaniels. And it is predictably a minus 5.9. And it has Jaylen Clark on the floor, but no McDaniels and no Gobert. Then the next 5 most used non-Rudy lineups all have Jaden McDaniels, and 4 of them are positive, are really good. and anywhere from good to passable defensively. Only one of them has both Clark and McDaniels, and they've only played 53 possessions together. It's Conley, Jaylen Clark, Jaden McDaniels, Julius, Randle, Naz, Reid, and they're a plus 34.2 in just 53 possessions. So I'm here to plead for two of the three of Gobert, McDaniels, and Clark on the floor at all times. Any lineup without Rudy Gobert has to include both Jaden McDaniels and Jaylen Clark. I do not care about the offensive implications of those lineups. And you could do it with Ant and no point guard and have Ant and McDaniels or Ant and Randle kind of alternate point guard duties if you have Randle and Reid on the floor. Or you could put McDaniels at the four, and include Clark, Ant, and Conley if you wanted to, or and Bones Highland. But you have to find a way, if you want your defense to be competitive, to have two of those three guys on the floor at the same time. We'll talk more about this as the data continues to come in, because I don't think it's changing. I think it's only becoming more stark. We'll dig in on power rankings next, where the Timberwolves rank against the rest of the league, and then we'll dig in on the Wolves-Hawks matchup as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at FanDuel. Fridays always feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. That's right. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern, that's 5 to 6:30 Central Time, have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprises, and more. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. The timing is perfect. Right before the games, right before the weekend starts. It adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour every Friday from 6 to 7:30 Eastern. That's 5 to 6:30 p.m. Central Time. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Big thank you once again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen of the day. And of course, thanks for your help in making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We absolutely could not do it without you. If you have not already, go check out the new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Wolves. It's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, every other major podcast app. Plus, you'll get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. Go to lockedonwolves.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. All right. So I mentioned the NBA.com power rankings a little bit ago, and they are, in fact, the best power rankings out there, hands down. Of course, I say that and I hype it up, and now this week he's actually got the Spurs ahead of the Thunder, which I get it. They've beaten him 3 times, but it feels a little aggressive. The Spurs or the Thunder are still historically good in a lot of ways, including the defense, which I already talked about, especially the defense. And given the, well, anyway, so set that aside. But I love how in-depth and intricate all of his evaluations of the individual teams are, and he includes all this information about each team. So for the Wolves, I already mentioned some of the Gobert stuff he talked about. He mentions like insights like this. The Wolves are tied with the Spurs for the league's best record between Thanksgiving and Christmas, but they've lost twice over the last 4 days. This was done on, I think, Sunday night or Monday. Christmas comeback in Denver falling up short, and then the ugly close against the Nets last week, or not just close, really the ugly game against the Nets last week. He talks about how they benefited from the Knicks being shorthanded last week, and then Ant playing really well offensively. And then he points out something we've talked about before on the show, is the schedule gets a little bit tougher. And he says in the sense of they're one of 2 teams, along with Atlanta, ironically, they played today, that haven't had any road trips longer than 4 games. And I don't think the Wolves have any, weirdly, longer than 4 games this year. Although they have at least a couple more of 4 games here upcoming, which is the thing I keep going back to is how relatively easy the travel and back-to-back like rest schedule is for the Timberwolves to this point. Yeah, so they're on a 4-game road trip now. They have another one in mid-January, and they have another one in March. That's it. They don't have any road trips longer than 4. They do have a stretch in late March into April that's 6 of 7 on the road. And that's actually, what they're doing now is, well, I guess that was the homestand where they had the one trip to Denver. So the travel schedule is weirdly reasonable for the Wolves. My hunch is that has something to do with the number of national TV games. I don't think it's like the Wolves are good and therefore the league is going easy on them. I think it's more they're on national TV more, which means to line up some of those games on ABC and Peacock and stuff, they've had to do more of the Tuesday, Thursday, or but yeah, ABC and Peacock and whatever. So like they've done the Peacock games on Tuesdays and they've done ABC games will be on Saturday and Sunday afternoons and stuff like that. That it's just kind of shifted. So there's been less back-to-backs, at least to this point. And then the travel schedule overall has been a little bit easier. So the Wolves actually have a back-to-back this weekend, Saturday, Sunday. It's their first back-to-back that they've had since November 29th and 30th. The Saturday, Sunday, right after Thanksgiving is the last time the Wolves had a back-to-back. And by the way, that was an impressive back-to-back. That's when they beat Boston and beat the Spurs, both at home, which is notable. And it was a Wemby-less Spurs team, but they still beat Boston and San Antonio. Remember, the Spurs were good without Wemby. And that was kind of their last really good stretch of games where they won 5 in a row before that bad loss against Phoenix. And ultimately it was 7 of 8 that they won. So they've handled back-to-backs well, and they traditionally have under Chris Finch. But it's notable that they have one again this weekend. Back to Schumann. He's got the Wolves 7th in the league, up from 9th a week ago. And that was prior to their win that they just got on Monday night against the Bulls. He's got them 1 spot behind the Rockets, 2 behind the Pistons, 3 behind the Knicks. This would have been right before the Jokic injury. And so it factors in the Cam Johnson injury, but not Jokic. And he's got Denver 3rd, Thunder 2nd, and the Spurs jump from 5th to 1st after beating the Thunder a couple of times in short order, which is a little interesting. And again, I care more about some of the extras he puts in here versus the actual ranking. But Minnesota being 7th seems fair to me. 1 spot ahead of Boston. It's just incredible how good the Celtics have been this year. He's got the Lakers at 9, down from 7. I should mention the Wolves are at 7, up from 9 the week before. Suns are 10th, which is just also remarkable how good the Suns have been, relatively speaking. So the upcoming schedule for Minnesota is tough. Once we get past a couple of these games here over the next few days. Sitting here right now, Minnesota is tied for 5th, virtually tied for 5th in the Western Conference. They're technically behind the Lakers because of the tiebreaker, and I guess they're 1 behind in the loss column, but they're both 7 back of the Thunder. They're only a half game back from Houston, who's 4th. And of course, we're going to see Houston upcoming here. Let's see. I guess it's a little further away than I thought. Houston is January 16th, a Friday night ESPN game, which it will be the first time the Timberwolves have seen the Rockets this year, which is pretty interesting. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So they're only a half game behind Houston. They're only a game and a half behind Denver, who's 3rd in the West and is going to be missing Nikola Jokic for at least 4 weeks with the knee injury. Minnesota still has the 5th best differential in the West, better than the Lakers. I'm sure that they'll pass the Lakers at any point here soon. And then getting past the Rockets and Nuggets will be challenging. And let's see, when do the Wolves play the Spurs again? I believe they play them again relatively soon as well. Yeah, January 11th. So actually before they play the Rockets. So between now and then, there's some winnable games. Atlanta, Miami twice, Washington, Cleveland twice, obviously tough, but winnable. And then you get 2 out of 3, or actually they play the Spurs twice. So 3 out of 4 games, 2 against San Antonio and 1 against Houston. That's going to be a really big stretch between January 11th and 17th here moving forward. So as of now, John Schumann has the Wolves 7th in the NBA, and ESPN has the Wolves 8th in the same spot that they were last week. And this ranking came out after the Jokic injury. And so it's got the Wolves 1 spot ahead of the Lakers. The difference is they have them 1 spot behind the Celtics, which seems a little silly to me. The Wolves are a half game better record-wise. They play in a tougher conference and they beat the Celtics, but whatever. But so I think Wolves 7 actually makes a ton of sense. I get having them behind, obviously, Denver, Houston, and the very best teams in the East. Having them, it would make sense to have them ahead of both the Celtics and Lakers. So yeah, I think 7th is actually perfectly. I don't really understand any other argument. But Minnesota 7th in the overall power rankings seems about right. All right, let's close by talking Wolves Hawks. We'll peek ahead at what some of those games actually are that are upcoming that I alluded to that are winnable on this road trip. We'll do all that here next to close out the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors at Gametime. During basketball season, there's nothing like being in the building. The energy, the crowd, the first big run that gets everyone on their feet. Fans want to be there for those moments and not stuck refreshing screens or guessing what tickets are really going to cost. And that's where Gametime comes in. The Gametime app gives fans the advantage back, making it incredibly easy to score amazing tickets fast, simple, and without the guesswork. Browsing the Gametime app is straightforward and intuitive. Finding tickets takes just a few taps. Seeing the view from your seat before buying makes choosing tickets easy and confident. Prices include fees up front, so the total is clear from the start. Plus, they have features like zone deals that help you unlock great seats at even better value. Perhaps it's an NBA game, the Wolves are back home next week, or it's any other live event. Everything's right there in one place. You can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Gametime app today and get in on the action. All right, let's close by talking Wolves Hawks. The Hawks are such a weird team. They've lost, 7 in a row, and Trae Young is questionable as of this recording to play in the game today. He seems likely to play. Like the way his season's gone is he got hurt 5 games in. In the 5th game of the season, he missed 20 games, 22 games, came back, played 1, sat the second night of a back-to-back, and then played 4 in a row. They've lost every game since he's come back. And then he sat against OKC. And I don't know if this was like, hey, we're probably going to lose to OKC anyway. Let's sit him. Whatever the case might be. Since he's come back, since his first game back from injury, they've played 7 games. They've lost all 7. They've lost 7 in a row. He's played in 5 of the 7. Their loss to OKC, they at least scored 129 points against a really good Thunder, obviously really good Thunder team with a great defense. But they still lost. And with him on the floor, they've been bad since he came back. He shot the ball well. Like, he's actually shooting threes really well. He's getting to the line like he does. Like, the offensive numbers are generally pretty good. I guess his last game when they lost to the Knicks, he was 2 of 9 shooting for 9 points in that game in 31 minutes. He appears to be on some sort of a minutes limit of just around 30 to 32 minutes. But in his absence, Nickeil Alexander-Walker started. And Nickeil's been awesome, scoring more than 20 a game. Now, I will say, with increased usage, some of the efficiency's gone down for Nickeil. He's shooting under 38% from 3, so basically league average. Some of the overall advanced numbers aren't super kind, and the defense appears to have slipped a little bit. Now, to be clear, the Hawks are not a good defensive team. They've been bottom half all season defensively, and they're even worse, of course, when Trae Young plays. But I think Nickeil getting more usage offensively has impacted him on the defensive end. More responsibility means you struggle more on that end of the floor because, you're just more tired. You have more to deal with. And then also more usage, more off the dribble 3-point shooting, stuff like that has dragged down his 3-point shooting overall a little bit. Now, he's still been awesome. I don't want to take away from that. Over 20 a game, 38% from 3 is fine, 45% for the field. He's still Nickeil, but he's been overextended just a little bit in the absence of Trae Young. And I still think, as bad as they've been with Trae Young on the floor, again, they've lost 7 straight since he came back. Early this season, they were, 2 and 3 in games that he played in. And one of them he played 7 minutes before he got hurt. So in games that he's played the entire game, they've won once this year. They're 1-8 in games where he's played the entire game. And in games that he hasn't played at all, they're 13-11. But I do think there's a way to make the Trae Young thing work. And I don't want to turn this into a Hawks analysis here, but I think because with Trae Young on the floor, it draws attention away from some of these other guys, whether it be Dyson Daniels or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, guys who I feel like could be more effective offensively with Trae Young in the fold. If Trae Young can play, this is the biggest if of all time, if Trae Young can play in a reasonable way to accommodate others' games, right? Now, he's a great passer, a really, really, really good passer, and he's averaging 9 assists per game in the 10 games he does play in. The big story for them, of course, has been Jalen Johnson, who's great. 24 a game, 37% from 3. He's shooting 58% from 2-point range. And on a team that's really bad defensively, he's been great defensively. And then whatever they've been able to get from Kristaps Porzingis, who is healthy now, he's been good for them too. There's a lot to like about a long, rangy Porzingis, Jalen Johnson, Nickeil Alexander-Walker led Hawks team with or without Trae Young. But they just haven't quite been able to figure it all out. This is the sort of matchup that does worry me simply because they've lost 7 in a row and they should be better than their record. And I don't know, it just kind of feels like like Trae Young is going to like go off against the Wolves. I don't know. That's probably not going to happen. But that's the sort of thing that would keep me up at night if I were the Wolves in this game, just because Trae Young is Trae Young and the Wolves are the Wolves, right? Overall this season, though, as I mentioned, the Hawks have been a bad defensive team. Their biggest problem has been they foul quite a bit and they give up a lot of offensive rebounds. Now, Minnesota is peaks and valleys when it comes to offensive rebounding themselves, but if they make that a focus of this game, if they shoot the ball okay from the perimeter, the Hawks aren't great at contesting on the perimeter themselves, like especially Trae Young plays. You can get what you want on the perimeter. So if they make their open shots, it doesn't matter. But if they can make corner crashing and just focusing on offensive rebounds a priority in this game, I think that could be a really good thing for Minnesota. I mean, the Hawks do play fast. They're top 5 in pace this year, so that makes me a little nervous if they're crashing too much and they allow Atlanta to get out and run the other direction. But if they just make their shots on the perimeter, this should be a relatively easy game for Minnesota. The Hawks don't offensive rebound themselves. They don't get to the free throw line this side of Trae Young. Like the concerns are if you let somebody like a Trae Young or I mean, honestly, I guess a Jalen Johnson. I mean, the volume from deep isn't there as much for Jalen, but like if you let them get hot from deep, that would be the one concern. Or if they just have it's a track meet. Those are the things to look out for. But Minnesota should be able to have their way on the glass on both ends of the floor. This is a very poor rebounding team, and they should be able to turn them over quite a bit as well. Like, I mean, Jalen Johnson's great. He turns the ball over a bunch. Nikhil turns the ball over a fair amount for the amount of time it's in his hands. Trae Young does as well. So if Minnesota can – I think they can play the pace game and beat the Hawks at their own game. It makes me a little bit, squeamish to think about that, but I think they could do it. The biggest thing is if Minnesota's going to get open shots, if they make their open shots and then get a few offensive rebounds here and there and can limit the Hawks in transition, the open shot opportunities in transition, Timberwolves will be just fine in this game. And again, it's a 2 p.m. Central tip in Atlanta as the Wolves will play here on New Year's Eve day. Peeking ahead to the rest of the schedule, the Wolves continue on this East Coast road trip. It's this weird stretch where the Timberwolves play a bunch of games against Eastern Conference teams, which they just haven't played that many games against the East. The Brooklyn game was the first. They're at Atlanta, and then they get 2 days off. Thursday, Friday off, at Miami Saturday, a 4 p.m. Central tip, at Washington Sunday for a 5 p.m. Central, and then back home. And then it's Miami, Cleveland, at Cleveland. So the stretch against Eastern teams continues against really disappointing teams overall, if you look at this stretch of games. But it's an opportunity for Minnesota to right the ship. We know Jokic is out for Denver, so surely they're going to lose some games. And, I mean, the Timberwolves don't play Denver again until March 1st, so that's around the time. Actually, no. Jokic really should be back. That's 8 weeks. He's only supposed to be out 4 weeks. So Minnesota's going to have to make their hay against some of these inferior teams and hope that the Nuggets slip a little bit in the absence of Jokic. So tomorrow we'll do the post-game pod. We'll have that up for you possibly late tonight, for sure early on New Year's Day. And then I'll have a show for you Friday as well to get you ready for the weekend against Miami and Washington. All that is upcoming here this week. And, of course, the live postcast with Jack and Luke tonight as well, live on YouTube. Then also the audio feed right here, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can find the live postcast recording after they are done going live. They'll post it to the audio feed as well. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. Also, a reminder and a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen, and for helping us become the #1 sports podcast network. We could not do it without you, the loyal listener. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Wolves ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. You can head to lockedonwolves.supercast.com to sign up. Again, lockedonwolves.supercast.com. Of course, Locked On Wolves is also part of the very same Locked On Podcast Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.